Welcome to the Ag Trees workshop here in Falmouth. Really nice to see you all here. I've actually been looking forward to this meeting a lot, more than I can remember looking forward to a workshop or a conference. So this is Ag Trees Falmouth 24. We have 2 days. We have 21 25-minute research talks from a range of disciplines. And if I've not identified your discipline on there, that's my error, not because you're not recognized. We have most people here are from Ag Trees and are speaking, but we have a sister project, Net Zero Plus, that co-funds many of us. We're working towards the same goals as I'll outline in a minute, with some differences. So we have lots of speakers here from Net Zero Plus as well, and that's fantastic. And we also have a couple of guests that aren't aligned with either projects who are going to give us some interesting talks related to what we're doing. And so why are we here? Well, the first reason is that we have Ilya and Jonathan are based here in Cornwall, and we always said we'd take the Ag Trees project meetings on the road down here. That means we also have to go to London for one before the end as well, because you say Dave and Minda and Alex are up there. The other thing is, instead of having a workshop where we all chat a lot, which is good, but it might not give us a full understanding of what everybody's doing, we thought it would be nice to have long research talks from everybody, so we really get an idea of the full spectrum of the research going on in this space. I'm hoping to learn a lot, and I hope you all learn a lot too. So, here's my talk. So this is a research talk from here, and we've all seen a version of this movie or this plot by now. So this is the model nexus that we use on both Ag Trees and Net Zero Plus. The idea is that once a user decides what they're going to do on their land, a bunch of different models, mostly process-based for trees and soil and farm production, pest and diseases unique to Ag Trees, and various other things come into play in order to deliver a host of ecosystem services. So the green ones are ecosystem services that we want more of, that should happen, should give more of if we plant trees. And then the orange ones are either risks, or food production might go down if we plant trees on land where we were producing food. And this model nexus is kind of common to Net Zero Plus and Ag Trees, and the guests are probably working on some model in this space as well. But Ag Trees itself has some add-ons to what Net Zero Plus was doing. The first one is going from 1 kilometre. So here's a 1 kilometre thing for Cornwall and the lizard. Thank you, Amy. And here is the parcel level version of that Ag Trees is working on. So Ilya and Ben and Ivis will talk more about that. We want to bring in actual data from various sources and update the models in the system online and in perpetuity. I think at least Mohammed and some others will talk about that. We're bringing in pest and disease risk, so we'll hear more about that from Jonathan and Dan later today and tomorrow. And then we wanted to take this technology to any particular user sort of by order, so they could select some area of land that they're interested in. This is the Salisbury Plain that belongs to the MOD. They can select some parts of it and they can figure out what they might want to do. So we're trying to digital twin that area. And then lastly, we try to produce decision support tools automatically without us having to build them ourselves. That's the add-ons to the activities on Net Zero Plus. And to deliver those add-ons, we first have to work with everyone that's already doing all that modeling on Net Zero Plus. And then we have 4 work packages. So number 1, which is Dave's work package, is to try to get all the underpinning technology for digital twinning working and working automatically. So for us, that means emulation and various other things. We have some green ticks here that I have put in because I think that they're done or mostly done in my head. Now, that doesn't mean if there isn't a green tick that it isn't done, and it doesn't mean that if there is a green tick that it is done. So it's not really clear how useful they are. There we are. So most of the work that we said we'd do in the call, so these are the bullet points from the objectives from the call, we think a lot of that's done to first order and is now being improved. That's really cool. Work package 2, which originally was Anna's work package, and she still works with us, but she can't be on the project full-time. So Ben leads this work package, and that's focusing on downscaling. There's an orange tick here. It should be orange, but it's green. So that we'll see more from Ilya what we've done in that space, and there's more to do. And then there's taking those downscaled predictions and getting Jules working on that high resolution, or getting tree predictions working, and also bringing in pest and disease risk to sort of amend the amount of carbon we might store under those risks with microclimates. Work package 3, which Brett leads, and he'll speak in a minute too. He's going to take those downscale forcings, and we've actually managed to get the models we have running with those downscale forcings, or at least some of them. It's going to work out how to bring some of that data in to calibrate particular things in the farm model, not just the process-based parameters, but also some behavioral stuff. Mohammed will talk about that, and maybe even will say that it's done, you never know. And then once you've got that, there's some other bits in terms of how we work out whether farmers would plant trees given some incentives, and what the other ecosystem service responses are, water quality and flood and so forth. That's to be delivered soon. And then the last work package is this bringing it together work package, where we take all the technology from the other 3 and we provide decision support tools that are sort of self-generating and automatic. So the first thing here is done. So there's an order form for users to get their own digital twins working. We'll see a movie of that in a minute. And then these other 3 things, I'll sort of give an overview of the goals, and then some of the research talks will show you what we've done, but I wouldn't be so bold to put any ticks nearby. Okay, so the kind of vision for how these things are generated is a user comes along and engages with our app, the movie on the next slide, and chooses their area of interest and the outcomes that they want to see. The stuff from work packages 2 and 3 is all sort of called automatically and generates this digital twin with all of the different technology feeding in. And then the final work package kind of like calls that digital twin and develops a decision support tool that guides users into using this technology. And for a user coming along, it might take them somewhere between 10 minutes and an hour to play with the tool. It'll take 1 or 2 days to do all of this. Maybe it might take more than that in the queue on Jasmine at the moment, to be fair, but whatever. And then I think we originally said 1 to 10 minutes for all of this stuff. I'm not so sure anymore, but we'll see. Right. So here's my party trick. We take our decision support tool generator and we zoom in on a location of interest. So here we are in Falmouth. So I always like to zoom in on an area where we're living. And I'm imagining that I'm going to select a bunch of parcels here in Falmouth. I'm deliberately including some reservoirs here just to point out that it doesn't really matter if the user's interested in seeing things nearby. I've accidentally planted on the golf course here, so hopefully they don't mind. It just makes the 18th fairway tricky. All right, so the user chooses their own area, and then as they move into the next page, they can tell us what they can do on the area. So when I play with this thing, the first thing I get them to do is take out all the places that are suburban or on water and tell us that we're not going to plant there. So this says maintain land use. Unfortunately, the projection isn't as high res as the video, but I'll make the slides available. And then after that, you can decide what to do. So here I'm just going to select all the remaining land parcels, and I'm going to tell it we can plant trees. Let's see how readable this is. It's not readable at all, so I'll tell you what it's doing. We select a bunch of things you can do, and one of them is plant woodland, and then you can say what types of species, whether it's a mixed stand and what ratio of mixing you want, or if you want a range of ratios and so on. And when you finish that and you said, we want to plant trees or we want to do agroforestry, you move on to the final page where you can choose your outcomes of interest. So these are the things that you're going to see in your decision support tool and the things that the digital twin will work to capture. So here's carbon by 2050. There's a recreation thing, which I'm sure Jack will talk about in his talk tomorrow. And then there's a bunch of biodiversity metrics. And since we can't read them, I might as well skip that bit. Or it'll run out. And what happens is as soon as the user's selected them all, there's a goat moth in here. They're the greatest moth of all time or something. Once it's finished, you exit the page and this thing sends us 3 files. And those 3 files go off into the cloud, and we can make a digital twin from them. So a digital twin is not just that, but it's also lots of things to different people, and it's not really clear which definition one's going with when one says we're building a digital twin. So some people feel like it's a real-time integration of data, and you sort of data your whole system out, and then you can query it in real time and move around, like with a large language model to help you. Or you can make a virtual world and have VR headsets and kind of walk through across some version of a new bridge that you would build or whatever. And some people think it's just a computer model. And the Turing are on the same side as the people thinking it's a computer model. They define it as some sort of computational model. And there are a couple of caveats to that. So it needs to be updated with data from what they call the physical twin, what we might call the real world. And it needs to be able to simulate and predict behavior in real time. And what real time means really is depending on the problem. If your problem is planting a field of wheat, you don't need it to be like that, but you do need it to be useful in what we call right time. Okay, so our digital twin is made right time or real time by, instead of treating all of the models, some of which need to run on supercomputers, as a thing that we can call, we use this deep Gaussian process emulation that sticks a sort of AI learning model over the network with some partially exposed hidden layers. And then when it's completed, and Dave will talk about how this kind of thing works, I think, in his talk in a few talks' time, then you have something that's like a fast version of that network that you can just call and get predictions with uncertainty. We have a bunch of data that's used in the sort of online calibration, some stuff on remote sensing, although that's more of a dream than a reality right now. We have DEFRA data from yields and management for the agricultural model. Right now we have some woodland carbon code stuff, but we might be getting some much richer tree data from FR soon too, so that will be interesting. And you take all of this stuff and combine it, and then you have a digital twin. But how do you use that kind of twin? And most people get that far with the modeling, and maybe they even do the AI on top of the modeling like we're doing. And then they pick 4 scenarios and they see what would happen under those 4 scenarios, and then they write a report. And then they do something else that wasn't one of the scenarios, but is kind of close to one, arguing that somehow those scenarios were representative. But I'm not so keen on that. So instead of doing the scenarios thing, we have a decision support tool that lets users find the best strategy in some sense that will be made clear, and then explore the strategies that would work for them in another sense that I'll make clear. So in this first movie, we have the decision support tool that was generated for Falmouth. Thanks to Tim and Bertrand, that sort of works automatically. And you can move these sliders around and find the strategy that works for your targets. Unfortunately, the font isn't visible on the projector. So what I did is I moved tree carbon down, and now there's a strategy that works, and I'm showing it. I move it up, I get a different one. I can select some cells and say they must be planted. What happens if I now reduce my carbon target, and I get another one? So in some sense, a real-time look at the best planting strategy in air quotes. And what does the best mean? Well, that needs some work. So what is an optimal strategy? I'll start with what is a strategy. So we can consider the year of planting to be a year in this set for every cell. I'm only going up to 2049 because we're concerned with net zero. But I mean, you could feasibly plan over longer time horizons than that. You can have a set of land parcels. So those are the little colored blue tiles on our screen. And for each of those blue tiles, you would have a species of tree that you would plant. And there are MS of those, and that might include up to mixing over species. So one of the classes might be some particular mixture. And so a planting strategy is a set. It's a set of parcels from this L, and each of those parcels is assigned a year, and each of those parcels is assigned a species. That's the planting strategy. And we're trying to find the best one. Okay, so each strategy leads to some ecosystem services. So the strategy P is planting, and then Z are the sort of outcomes that were on that list. So we had carbon, we had REC, we had 3 biodiversity targets, and the area that was planted. So we could have some targets on each of those outcomes, and we can order the outcomes so that the first P have targets, and maybe there's some more that don't. And so then we can think about, okay, what's the space of all possible planting strategies? How big is that? And how hard is the task going to be to find the best one in terms of these outcomes related to the targets? So just to check you all the way. If we had just 2 species and 50 cells, roughly how many planting strategies are there?
50 minus 1.
Say again?
2 to the power of 50 minus 1.
Well, there's still 26 years you can plant.
Oh, cheers. That's a lot more.
And you don't have to plant.
And you don't, yeah, the one is you don't have to plant, the 26 years, the number of species, and then to the power of the number of cells. So 50 cells isn't that many. That Falmouth example is about 450. But for just 50 cells, that's 1.6 times 10 to the 86, which is roughly 1,000 times larger than the number of atoms in the universe. So lots and lots of possible planting strategies that we have to search and to choose from. How do we find the best one? Well, one definition of the best one is using a utility function. So I've written a general Chebyshev utility function here where you have individual utilities for each outcome. You have some known basis functions G, and then you have some weights, so they live in the 0-1 simplex. What those are we'll come to later. But if you had such a function, then the best strategy is the planting strategy that maximizes your expected utility. Okay, so some problems that we're setting up so far. The first one is that we can't really evaluate these outcomes directly. We have this digital twin emulator, so we've got uncertainty on the Z. Not a disaster if we've got to compute expectations, but it's a thing to bear in mind throughout. How do we actually find the user's utility function? So how do we fix those things? More from me in a minute. And how do you find like the best atom in 1,000 universes in finite time? Tim's going to tell us the answer to that tomorrow. Now, optimization is one thing that you can do, but I'm kind of more keen on this space of other possibilities. So we can define a target compatible space to be the space of all strategies that meet the targets. We could do that, but that is hard when we don't actually get to evaluate the strategy function every time. We only have this emulator. So we can also define this target compatible space probabilistically. So that would be the set of strategies such that the probability that you exceed you meet each target is bigger than some alpha. We actually ask for the alpha in the app, so we call that a risk tolerance. You want it to be big, right? If it's 99%, you're almost sure, right, that you're going to meet the targets with those strategies. So if you define that space, then it turns out with a little bit of math that you can access it directly using stuff from the digital twin. So you can evaluate this thing really, really fast. And so you can give it a planting strategy and find out whether it's in or out, even if you've not evaluated all the models there. That's great. So what we do with this kind of power right now in the app is at launch, 5,000 samples are generated from the whole space. Those are now fixed for the entire duration of the user's experience. And then when the user plays with the targets, the ones that are target compatible are kind of kept in the set. So we've only really looked at 5,000 strategies. And then the optimization that we're currently doing on page 1, not the one that Tim will show tomorrow, but the one that we're currently doing, finds the best of those finitely sampled strategies. Not a solution to the problem that I said on the last page, but it's what we have right now. So here's a movie for what our second page does that tries to show the users what that target compatible space might look like. And so you can go into this second page, and the idea is it shows you 4 strategies chosen at random from the target compatible space. The full idea is that we would choose these in a curated way that separates them out in some way, and I'm going to speak about that towards the end of my talk in a minute. But right now, what it's doing is showing 4 uniformly sampled strategies from target compatible space intersected with those 5,000 initial samples. Note that's not very good. But generating from that target compatible space within the app is kind of the holy grail. So we had that initial thing where you moved a slider and there was no target compatibility. But that just means that the 5,000 atoms we looked at of the atoms in 1,000 universes didn't meet the targets. That doesn't really say anything about how easy it is to meet them or whether they can be met or not. So I think Bertrand, Tim, and Alex will all talk about different ways that we're trying to figure out how to sample from this place efficiently. But when we do, we will find that there are places in this space that are more similar than others, and these will lead to themes of target compatibility that we would like to show to users. Okay, so suppose we had the image of the target compatible strategies. So you think about the space of planting strategies, and then you've got the space of outcomes under those strategies. That's what the image means. Then can we partition the image of the target compatible space? And partitioning is like this thing where you divide the space up into regions of things are similar, and then each target compatible strategy is just a point in this space somewhere. So that's what we really want to do, so that on page 2 you can see, okay, this one's similar, and then each of the 4 panels is just showing you different ones from this sort of partitioning. Okay, so partitioning is not so easy. The first problem is that users' preferences impose non-Euclidean geometry on ZSAR. What does that mean? That means, so take a simple utility function where we just take the linear combination of the outcomes and we have some weights. So making that real, you'll have a weight for carbon and a weight for species richness and a weight for the goat moth and so on. And your utility is some weighted combination of those. Now, if you're trying to partition a space and your norm doesn't consider those weights, then it thinks things are similar because they're closer numerically. So if carbon ranges from 0 to 100 and your probability of species is from 0 to 1, carbon is more important than biodiversity by accident. And if you have I've got 20 species I'm interested in, somehow biodiversity has become more important, even though you were just interested in those species in some way. So these weights are critical, but you can't think about clustering without them. And then the second problem is, well, partitioning is really harder in numbers of dimensions. So even in 5D, this is a really hard problem, kind of like trying to tessellate this region. So we'd prefer it was in a smaller space. And our solution to both is to find a stochastic embedding. I'm going to explain what that is. So an embedding is you take your outputs, so carbon, biodiversity, area, and whatever it is, and you project that into, let's say, a 2D space so that you can do this kind of partitioning trick. And the way you do the projection handles the user preferences at the same time. So first you have to suppose that we could get them. But once we can, the idea is that you find these things just by optimization and you minimize a distance in distributions from the distribution of points weighted. So they're weighted by this diagonal matrix here of weights. So you have kind of like a Gaussian kernel on the space of outcomes. And then you have a sort of more, this is normally a T1 process or a Cauchy process that separates things out on the edges, but it could equally be Gaussian if you like. And that works in Euclidean world. And so each of these things gives you kind of like probabilities that things are near to each other in the different spaces. So then you can choose your points here to match those probabilities up so that everything is kind of like as close as it would be in the 2D space to in the high dimensional space. Right, to pull this off, we need some data from the users to get those W's. And the way we do that is a trick we figured out on Net Zero Plus with Amy and Bertrand. So page 3 of the app is trying to get those W's, and users are shown these pairs of maps and they see what all the outcomes are. I'm sorry about the projection, you can't see it. And they pick one, and each time they pick one, they click the thing, and that sends us some data, and the data that we get is, I, the user, prefer this one over that one. So we'll see it happen one more time, and then I'm going to click. Okay, so we get some more data, and then we can do this preference learning trick. Now, this is the vanilla preference learning that is in there now that we're working on because it sucks. And the first reason it sucks is that the weights are modeled as normal, but that doesn't account for the fact that they should sum to 1 and they're between 0 and 1 and so on. But the trick is, okay, so the weights are normal, you don't know the parameters. The data that you're getting is kind of like, I prefer these outcomes to these outcomes from the user. We know how Bayes' theorem works, but if you know anything about how Bayes works, all you have to be able to do is evaluate that function for the data, and then you can do MCMC sampling to get the posterior. And it turns out that if I prefer Z to Z prime, I'm going to skip the partitioning then. If I prefer Z to Z prime, then my utility must be bigger than 0 of the difference. And so then that gives me a probabilistic statement, which, because this is normal, gives me the normal CDF, and that's just a function in R, right? That's D norm, and you just put the numbers in. So if we can just put the numbers in, we can sample from them, we can get the weights, and then we can do this embedding. And then I think I'm going to skip how we do this partitioning, but I'll leave the slides there, and there's some nice animations of Chinese restaurant processes and so on for another time. So let's skip to the end. I'm just saying that we can actually do this, and it's not k-means, it's pretty cool. We'll talk about that offline. So final slide, looking ahead. To do this kind of inversion-based decision support, we need efficient sampling of the atoms of thousands of universes. That is a lot of what we're going to hear, I think, from the other people on Work Package 4 today and tomorrow. Representative sampling is really important. If you just get some of them, then you're going to introduce algorithmic bias, which in a decision support setting might be unethical. Getting those user preferences is critical, and we're working on something better. If you don't have them, this whole thing falls down. It just amounts to accidental, based on the size of the numbers you're considering. And then we have these considerations of how much can we do offline and how much do we have to do in the app, because the bigger the algorithm for searching these spaces, the slower everything's going to get. Okay, some references on some of the things I've said. Thank you.